In 1519, Hernán Cortés set sail for the New World, driven by tales of gold, glory, and the legendary Fountain of Youth. But what awaited him on the shores of Mexico was far darker than any myth. Beneath the lush jungles and ancient temples of the Maya, he would uncover a secret older than time itself, a curse that defied death and turned men into monsters. This is not the story history remembers. This is the truth buried by time. And so it begins.
Before Hernán Cortés came seeking the Fountain of Youth, others had already arrived. Greedy men, draped in steel, who did not come to trade or to learn, but to take. They brought war, fire, and suffering, forcing our people to do the unthinkable. A girl, desperate to stop the destruction, turned to the gods, not for mercy, but for vengeance. She made a plea, one that no mortal had ever dared to ask, and the gods answered. The earth split, the sky wept blood, and from the graves of our ancestors, the dead rose, their spirits bound to a hunger that could never be satisfied. The conquistadors, so fearless with their guns and armor, met a horror they could not kill. They were torn apart, their bones left to rot beneath the jungle canopy. But curses do not fade. They fester. When Cortés set foot on this land, he did not walk into an untouched paradise. He stepped into the shadow of a price already paid. He did not know it yet, but the fate of those before him would soon be his own.
Midday sun hung high, casting sharp shadows over the jungle. The waves lapped gently against the shore, as they had for centuries, whispering to the sand in a voice older than memory. Kinich stood at the edge of the cliffs, his bare feet gripping the warm stone, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was not alone. The entire village had gathered behind him, watching in stunned silence. Great towering beasts moved over the water, their white wings catching the wind. Canoes, impossibly large and shining like the shells of sacred beetles. Their bodies were wooden, yet they moved with the force of the sky itself. No storm drove them. No gods seemed to command them. And yet, they came. Balaam, the eldest among the gathered warriors, narrowed his eyes. This is not the way of men. No canoe moves against the will of the sea like this. Perhaps they are spirits, Itzel murmured, clutching his obsidian dagger. The ancestors returned in anger. Kinich shook his head, his fingers curling into a fist.
They come like shadows on the waves. The gods have warned us.
Brothers, do you see it? There, on the edge of the world. Something moved.
Look at the size of those canoes. They have wings like birds.
Those are not canoes. No canoe shines like the sun.
The village elder, Chak Tok, stood with his staff planted firmly in the ground. His eyes, clouded with years of wisdom, studied the approaching vessels.
Do not send warnings without reason.
He finally said, "Whatever comes, we must be ready." Mothers pulled their children back. Warriors exchanged glances, gripping their weapons tighter. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then, the first smaller boat was lowered from the great beast. It glided toward the shore, carrying men with golden chest plates and sharp steel at their sides. One of them, draped in a deep red cloth, stood at the bow, watching the land with piercing eyes. Kinich turned to Balaam, his voice steady, despite the dread curling in his stomach. "The gods are watching, brother. We must be ready." The man in red stepped off the boat, his boots sinking slightly into the wet sand. He surveyed the gathered villagers, his gaze lingering for a moment on Kinich before moving on. The air crackled with a silence thicker than the jungle humidity.
God willing, And with our steel, the riches of this fountain shall be ours.
An elderly man emerges from the dense jungle, his weathered face tense with fear. Behind him, a group of villagers and warriors stand in silent dread. He raises a trembling hand, blocking Cortés's path.
You should not have come. This is not the first time you come here. The land is cursed. The waters do not grant life, only eternity in death. Turn back now before it is too late. The fountain does not heal. It hungers. There are warriors, unlike any you have faced before. They do not come here, but you will find them. And when you do, none of your men will leave this land alive.
I have sailed across the world, fought empires, and bent kings to my will. You think old stories will stop me? If this land is cursed, then I will break the curse. If there are warriors, I will face them. Nothing will stand between me and what I seek. You speak of death, yet you still live. Perhaps you fear what you do not understand. I did not come for warnings. I came for the fountain, and I will find it.
You do not take from this land, it takes from you. Long ago, you came to this land with fire and steel, seeking gold, seeking glory. You crossed the great waters with promises on your lips and death in your hands. You took what was not yours, shattered what you did not understand. But you were not the only one watching. There was a girl, one of our own. She did not fight you with blades or arrows. She walked the sacred path, knelt before the gods and begged for justice. And the gods, they listened. They did not send warriors to drive you away. They did not bring storms to sink your ships. No, they gave you what you truly desired, a gift wrapped in a curse. You sought eternal life, Hernán Cortés, and so it was given. A curse that binds flesh to this land, that traps even the one who called it forth. She too is lost in the endless cycle of suffering. Now you stand at the edge of fate, where the jungle breathes and the earth remembers. This land does not forget. It does not forgive.
The air grew thick, pressing against the lungs of Cortés and his men. The jungle seemed to close in, its shadows lengthening unnaturally. The elder's words hung in the humid air like a final judgment. Cortés tightened his grip on his sword, his knuckles white. He had faced countless battles, conquered cities, and crushed empires beneath his heel. But this was different. The weight of unseen eyes bore down on him, the jungle itself seeming to breathe. One of his men, Ruiz, spat on the ground, his voice dripping with skepticism.
Curses. Ghost stories. We are men, not children. Enough of this nonsense.
Before anyone could answer, the earth trembled beneath them. Not a single sharp quake, but a deep, slow rumble, as if something ancient was stirring beneath the soil. The villagers and warriors behind the elder remained still, their faces unreadable. They did not run. They did not cower. They only watched. Cortés took a step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. His voice, though steady, carried an edge of doubt.
If this is meant to frighten me, you'll have to do better. Tell me more about this nonsense, this so-called curse. We will be ready for your surprises.
You do not prepare for what you do not understand. Long ago, before your kind set foot on this land, our cities rose like giants from the earth. Our people carved stone into temples, their hands guided by the gods. The jungle obeyed us, the rivers fed us, and the sky watched over us with favor. Then you came, not as gods as some had foolishly believed, but as men, hungry, desperate, filled with greed. You brought steel that cut deeper than our obsidian, beasts we had never seen, and tongues that twisted truth. But worst of all, you brought death. Our warriors fell not just to your weapons, but to the sickness carried in your breath. Whole villages withered, their voices silenced by a plague unknown to our land. The great cities, once alive with song and fire, crumbled into ruins. You did not just kill men, you shattered the spirit of an empire. But among our people there was one who saw beyond your weapons and false words. A girl, young but wise in the ways of the gods. She knelt before the altars, calling upon the old ones, the forgotten ones. She did not ask for salvation. Number, she asked for a curse. And the gods listened. The land that had once welcomed you turned against you. The jungle, once tamed, grew wild with hunger. The rivers ran red, not with blood, but with something worse, something that clung to your flesh, to your very souls. And those who took from us, who slaughtered without remorse, found that death was not the end they expected. She became a part of it, trapped within the curse she had unleashed, neither living nor dead, bound to the fate she wove. And now, Cortés, you stand on the same path. You came seeking glory, seeking eternity, but eternity is not what you imagine. It is not gold nor power. It is a fate worse than death. The curse has not ended. It only waits. I will tell you her story, and then you may decide for yourself if you still wish to go forward. You are not the first to come here, believing you could take everything without offering anything in return. Many, before you set foot on this land, with greed in their hearts, certain that they could claim what was never theirs. Not far from here, in a village now swallowed by the jungle, there was a girl named Itzel. She was no warrior, no priestess, just a girl of 17 summers, with laughter as bright as the morning sun and a heart that had not yet learned fear. She had a younger brother, a boy who followed her everywhere, who still believed that the gods whispered in the rustling leaves and sent messages in the cries of the birds. Itzel was among the first to see your kind. She had been gathering water from the river when the silence of the jungle broke with a sound like thunder upon the waves. She turned and saw them, great wooden canoes, unlike anything she had ever known, pushed across the sea by unseen hands. They were not like the dugouts her people used. They rose high above the water, their white skins billowing in the wind as if they were alive. She did not understand that it was cloth catching the air, nor did she see the men aboard as mortal. To her, they were gods. She ran, her feet barely touching the earth, as she rushed back to the village, calling out to her people, her voice breathless with awe. "The gods are here!" she cried. "They have come from across the endless waters." The villagers, curious and afraid, followed her to the shore. There they saw them. Tall men in shining skins, their faces pale like the moon, their beards thick like the jungle's vines. They stepped onto the land with weapons that spat fire, their eyes scanning the world as if it already belonged to them. At first, there was peace. At first, the strangers smiled and accepted the gifts of fruit and woven cloth, of feathers and jade. They spoke words no one understood, yet they pointed to gold, always gold, as if it were more precious than life itself. But soon their kindness turned to commands. Their hands, which had once accepted gifts, now reached for more. They took what they wanted, food, land, people, and when our warriors stood against them, they were cut down by weapons that roared like storms and killed with invisible hands. Itzel watched as her world burned. She watched her brother fall to their sickness, his body shaking, his breath turning to a whisper before the gods could even take him. She saw her father forced to kneel before men who did not know his name, his pride crushed beneath their boots, and in her heart something turned to stone. She did not cry, she did not plead. She climbed the temple steps alone, her hands curled into fists, her voice steady as she spoke to the gods. "You have abandoned us," she said, "or perhaps you are not listening, but I will make you listen." No one knows the words she spoke that night. No one knows what she offered, what she sacrificed. But when the sky grew dark and the wind screamed through the trees, when the ground cracked open and the dead clawed their way from the soil, we knew the gods had answered. The strangers, the ones who had come before you, paid the price for their greed. Their flesh rotted before their eyes, their bones turned brittle, their screams were lost in the endless wailing of the dead. But the curse was not theirs alone. The land, too, suffered. The rivers ran red, the crops withered, the air turned heavy with the scent of decay. And Itzel, the girl who had called upon such wrath, was bound to the nightmare she had unleashed. She walks still, neither living nor dead, her spirit cursed to wander, just as you will. You came seeking eternal life, Cortés. Perhaps the gods will grant your wish.
The elder fixes his gaze on Cortés, his voice heavy with warning.
I have told you her story. If you go on, if you take what is not yours, then one day I will be telling those who come after you the story of Hernán Cortés,